All right, let's talk about the progressive era. This lesson will kind of cover just a general overview of the progressives, who they are, their general goals, um, basically looking to fix some of society's problems that came about as a result of the rapid industrialization and rapid urbanization of the late 1800s and early 1900s. So we're looking to fix all the wrongs, essentially. We'll also focus more on the political reforms that are taking place during this time period in this lesson as well. So let's talk about the politics. Great place to start is political corruption, reforming the city governments. And if we're talking city governments, we're talking about Tammany Hall. We're talking about the political machines, the corrupt political organizations that are kind of controlling who does what, how things get done, who gets paid, and who doesn't. You know, our ideas of how our government should work were certainly manipulated and switched around so that those few that had money, wealth, and power pretty much could run the show. So representative democracy kind of takes a back seat, and the machines are pretty much running the show. So how do we progress forward beyond that corrupt system? Well, one of the things we create, one law is the Pendleton Act, which is going to create civil service exams essentially. So we got a commission, civil service commission, that sets up and administers these exams. And basically, government jobs in certain positions within the city now require you to pass this exam to prove that you are competent and capable of doing said job. It's no longer based on who you know and what favors you've done for Boss Tweed or the political machine. It's now let's get competent, capable people in those positions. And the exams would sort of weed out those that couldn't and those that could. So it's just making sure like more competent people are working those jobs and like it's being done correctly. And when jobs are being done with competent people, they tend to get done better. Um, we also create different initiatives to sort of replace some of these corrupt leaders, trying to end, the spoil system. Basically, the spoil system is who you know, not so much what you know. And remember, Tammany Hall and Boss Tweed and a lot of these political machines gained a lot of popularity, especially with this new wave of immigrants coming in, because they were the ones that were helping them out, giving them favors, providing shelter, food, and jobs. So in some cases, these political forms weren't really popular, but you know, people in the government and society, some people in society realize that this is not a long-term solution. You can't have this level of corruption and have a functioning democracy or a representative democracy. So we got to take these steps, despite how it did upset some members of the population, for the greater good of society. Political reform and reforming local governments and getting rid of the machine was instrumental. Another key aspect or element of the progressive era was journalism. Um, People known as muckrakers, people who would figuratively rake up the muck of society. They would look at the problems associated with urbanization and industrialization, and they would do investigative journalism and they would report about it. People read a lot back in this time period. There was no TV or radio yet, so this is how people got their information. Um, so this is like a real golden era of journalism, and there was plenty of topics to write about, plenty of corruption, plenty of problems, and these muckrakers, like I said, would sort of show society all of its problems, and once you expose those problems, then initiatives were created to sort of reform or change them. It's hard to continue to do something illegally or corruptly if people know about it, and that's kind of the goal of the muckrakers. Jacob Rees, we talked about briefly in the first part of this unit. He's the guy that wrote How the Other Half Lives, kind of showing the poor side of urban development, the tenements, the rundown row houses, and all that stuff, and all the issues associated with poor housing. Once Rees exposes the tenements and the urbanization issues, then initiatives are created to sort of reform and make better housing available for the poor. Upton Sinclair, author of The Jungle. This book covers like the meatpacking industry and all the problems associated with meatpacking and food in general. A lot of really shady stuff going on with the food industries, and Sinclair is instrumental in exposing those problems, which would then lead to reform efforts to change how food gets processed. And we'll talk more about what those are. But right now, we're just kind of giving an overview of these muckrakers. Ida Tarbell, another famous one, wrote The History of Standard Oil, which basically exposes some of the unfair monopolistic business practices of John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller was extremely upset about this because she put him on blast, exposed his tendencies, and this is kind of what got the ball rolling for antitrust legislation to kind of curtail and prevent those sort of behaviors that Rockefeller and many others were guilty of committing at that time. So again, the term progressives, it's got the word progress right in it. So think of how we're progressing society forward. Uh, Progressives were very big on education, trying to educate the masses about the problems and just to make them educated in general, more analytical thinkers. They felt that critical thinkers, educated people would be more capable and able of exposing future corruption or future issues. Um, that's kind of the goal of education in general. And this is why we get like public education pushes in this time period as well, because we realize an educated populace is one that is going to create a better society. Political reform. So, looking at how we kind of deal with our government, how we reform some aspects that weren't so favorable for the public at large. There was too much corruption, too much policies that put the power in the hands of too few. So, for example, the primary. Um, a primary is where the initiative, the reform of a primary. Now the voters get to choose their party's candidate for general elections. So prior to this primary reform, the political party leaders would pick specific candidates for state and local offices. The problem here and why that needed to be reformed is it's a small group of people who are politically connected, typically wealthy. They have too much power in who gets nominated, and it's kind of like a spoil system issue. Like it's more about who you know and how well you are connected politically than how good of a candidate you would be. It's not about the issues or what reforms or what you're going to do as an elected official. It's more about, hey, I know the right people and I've paid the right people, and that sort of issue. So now with the primary voters, the power goes back into the hands of the voters. They get to select the party's candidates. Another political reform is the initiative. This gives voters the right to put a bill before a state legislature. And again, before the initiative reform, only members of a state legislature could introduce bills. And again, it's the same idea with the primary issue. If it's too small of a group of people having too much authority or control over the legislative process, the lawmaking process, then those laws would probably tend to only serve that select small group. Now that we have the initiative, we're putting the lawmaking process back into the hands of the voters, and they have more of a say in laws that impact their lives directly and not just a small group of people. A couple other major political reforms: the referendum. This allows voters to put a bill on the ballot and vote it into law. Uh, this is important because before the referendum, only legislators could pass laws. Now we have a process in which voters can vote directly on a bill. So if there's a real pressing issue that the majority of people want to see put into place, uh, the referendum allows them to sort of to do that. Beforehand, again, that small group of politically connected or financially connected people, they would create laws that would only serve their interests. Think about industrialization and how, for the longest time, government and the industrialists would sort of work hand in hand to keep the laws, in place that would allow industrialists to continue to monopolize and continue to run their business unchecked or unregulated. Now the referendum kind of again shifts that power away from the rich, the wealthy, politically connected, and now the voters can vote directly on a bill. Another key important political reform is the recall. Now the voters, the public, can remove an elected official from office. So before the recall, only the courts, only the legislators themselves could remove corrupt officials. And again, if it's a small group of people that are in charge of that process, they too are often corrupt and they're probably in on it and they're not going to kick out their own, right? One hand washes the other. So now with the recall, if something corrupt happens or if something is exposed that the politician shouldn't have been doing, now the voters can push for the recall and they can vote to have them removed from office. To wrap up the political reforms at the constitutional level, a couple of key amendments here. The 16th Amendment creates the graduated income tax. So, to kind of even the playing field and make it more balanced for the general public and the poor and middle class, the graduated income tax is going to tax people based more equally. It's going to be more proportional. It's going to be based on one's income. So instead of a flat tax where everyone pays the same tax rate across the board, whether you're like poor or rich, uh, the graduated income tax is more proportional to your income. So the more money you make, the more you're getting taxed. If you're really poor and you don't make a lot of money, you're going to get taxed less. Um, so that's the basic gist of the 16th Amendment. The 17th Amendment is the direct election of senators. So, to prevent powerful interest groups, corrupt officials, or for people from gaining too much power, now the vote will be in the hands of the people. So, it's no longer just a small group of politically connected people. It's not a small group of politicians who then get to choose amongst their own. It's now the people who then get to vote for the senators. And this is just a fun little way to help you kind of remember the 17th Amendment. Citizens get to vote for two senators. Remember, there's two for each state. And then I don't know if this helps or not, if it's corny, but sing along with Dr. Hartnell. 17 senators sitting in a tree, Picking, and picking their senators. Clever, corny, whatever. All right, so that wraps up this lesson. Brief little intro on progressives and some of the key political reforms that were created.